forsaking God, give us a king. And it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah, and they were judges in Beersheba. And the sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me, and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run for his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over fifties, and will set them to fear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and the instruments of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be confectionaries, to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. Take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyard, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants and your maid servants, and your godliest young men and your asses, and put them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. Ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which he shall have chosen you, and the Lord shall not hear you. Nevertheless the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us, and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, Go ye every man unto his city. Hello everybody, and welcome to a new video from Jörg, Joggler66, Hour of the Truth. Today we have Monday, or, well, that's a little bit of this of misunderstanding that I was also talking about yesterday in my German video on the reading of Romanism and the Reformation, about what day is it anyway? According to the Antichrist calendar, I am sitting here at 10 minutes to 10 o'clock in the night on Monday evening, but actually in the Bible the day starts with the night and ends with the day, as it is written, among others, in the book of Genesis, where it says, and the night and the day was and the morning was the first day, and the second day, you know? So when I'm in the Antichrist calendar sitting here Monday evening at 10 p.m. in front of my computer, then actually the new day has already started. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday night. but I think that I will just screw with your minds when I tell you, well, I'm sitting here Tuesday night, the 15th of October. And he says, no, the 15th of October was Monday night. What's he telling about? I don't want to confuse anything, but maybe that's why we have to get out of here. We have to get out of here, and this is why James Edwin Wylie wrote that book, The Great Exodus. And what is a better introduction to my brother Bret, who is here with me on the third reading on Monday night or Tuesday night, anyway, the 15th of October, 10 p.m. almost over here in Europe, to join me in the third reading of The Great Exodus by James Edwin Wylie. What are your thoughts about what day it is, Bret?
Well, it certainly is. That's the way the farmers did it too, Jörg. Here in the United States, my family was the same. When the sun goes down, the day's over.
The next day starts.
That's the old way. That's the old way before these clocks and everything came around, And now we got to digitize everything and quantize everything and cubicle, remember that poster of the United Europe with the Tower of Babel,
sure,
European Union thing, and all the square heads, and then the baby's got a round head, and how
the brick heads and
the brick heads. It's that's what they turn us into, is brick heads. Unless we come out of her, my people. The Lord wants us to come out of that system, come out of that indoctrination, come out of that brainwashing, and have some what do you want to say? Fellowship with the Lord alone, just get rid of everything else and find the Lord. He'll set you straight.
Yeah.
It's the only way to get straight.
It's very hard when you have lived all your life with these day-night paradigm.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden to start switching in your head and understand, now we are Tuesday night, and the next day starts with the evening and will end with the day. It's just a thing that needs some time to settle in my head.
Yeah, Tom said something to us this Saturday, Sabbath day. I said Sunday. Shame on me. Sabbath day.
My time it's Sunday.
Yeah, we got together yesterday too, but yeah, when we got together, that's true. It is Sunday at your time when we get together for unless it's summer, then it's actually still day. Isn't that interesting?
I think a lot of people will switch off the video right now. It's too confusing.
Well, I'm sorry to break into our personal Bible study here, but I can't help it. Tom said something rather profound on Sabbath, and that is that we're perfect. It's this world that makes us imperfect, and our conforming to this world makes us imperfect. So when we say we're not perfect, we're admitting that we are part of this world in a sense.
Yeah, I think he's not that wrong with that.
I really don't think he is either. I was thinking about that long and hard and going, oh boy, we really are. And I'm no shortage of that. But anyway, it's not about me at all. It's about the truth. So let's get right into it, Jörg. I'm ready.
Okay, so we are going into the reading of the book of James Edwin Wylie that was published after his death in the end of the 19th century. The Great Exodus, or the Time of the End. How near are we to it? Well, we are going to discover a little bit further today how near we are to it when we start reading chapter 3, the Typology of Providence. There is a silent, continuous prophecy underlying all nature, animate and inanimate. Nothing comes into being without having been typified, or, in a sense, predicted. This universal typology is founded in the constitution of things. And let me assure you that when James Edwin Wylie here uses the term universal, he does not refer to Catholic, he refers to general. Okay? This general typology is founded in the constitution of things. And that constitution is the result of the unity and unchangeableness of the eternal mind. One supreme and unchangeable mind must necessarily have one established order of principles or laws according to which it works. The inevitable result of this is a certain generic uniformity in the working in all ages, in all departments, and in all worlds. Infinite variety there may be in the ultimate manifestation. Boundless diversity there may be in the detail. But in the normal and governing principles there is, and must be, a similarity amounting to identity. This holds good in all departments of work, whether material or spiritual. All are linked together by the chain of one great unchangeable principle, and therefore each act in the series is the image of the prophecy of that which comes after it. History.
That's. I'm sorry, Yerk, to interrupt you right now, but
okay.
All are linked together by the chain of one great unchangeable principle, and therefore each act is in the series. In the series is the image or the prophecy. I just wanted to correct you. That word is image.
And what did I say?
I'm not sure. I forgot. It doesn't matter. But yeah.
Okay, and therefore each act in the series is the image or the prophecy of that which comes after it. So that when afterward it comes, we will recognize it as what it was prophesied, you know? I think this is the way we understand this. History is thus an organism, not a sandheap of individual and isolated facts. It is a great tree in whose living germ or seminal act lies wrapped up the great consummation. The first act and each succeeding act of the series, which stretches betwixt the first and the last, is the image, the type, the prediction of the grand terminal one. Its coming is foretold, as it were, long before it comes, and its image is 1,000 and 1,000 times seen before it is actually realized. Our very bodies had their image on earth long years ago. Rude and imperfect were the earliest prototypes of the human frame, but prototypes there were. All through those geologic eras that preceded the human, man's advent may be said to have been foretold. An ingenious reasoner, had such then existed, would have inferred that a nobler and more perfect creature than any that had yet appeared would in due time arise. Among the uncouth and colossal animals that tenanted the globe in pre-Adamite times, science tells us were the approximations in several of their organs to the wondrous and finished mechanisms of the human frame. Now, I have a question. What the hell
That's
is this
a big
guy,
sentence, Yerk.
what the hell is this guy talking about?
Yeah, right. Good question.
Pre-Adamite times? What's a pre-Adamite time?
I don't know. Before creation?
Has he studied a little bit of Charles Darwin's work?
I don't understand it either.
What the heck is James Atkin Wylie talking about here?
Science tells us. He's talking about science. We got to be careful with science because science is, today's science, we have Darwinian science. Yeah, exactly. This could be from the Darwinian angle right here, like you said.
Yeah, but that was in its children's shoes, in its baby shoes in the 19th century. That was not that advanced as what he is talking about here. Among the uncouth and colossal animals that tenanted the globe in pre-Adamite times, science tells us there were approximations in several of their organs to the wondrous and finished mechanism of the human frame. In other words, in pre-Adamite times, there were creatures on this world that were a mirror of man to come. This is how I understand what he says here. Anyway, whatever he says here, it is not very biblical, so we have to be very careful to understand him correctly afterwards.
Sure, that's right. You know? That's right. Yep. Thanks, Jörg.
In some, there was a feeble approach to the brain, in others to the hand. showing that the divine idea of man had already been formed, that had indeed existed before creation began. These were but dim revelations, nevertheless, looking along the line of view which they opened up. The vista might be seen closed with the noble form of man, wearing the crown of his Maker's image and head over all his works. So what does he say here? There was a creation before this creation was. There was a testing out of this creation before this creation actually came into working, or how do you understand this, Bret?
Yeah, that is, well, we know the Bible says 6 days, right? That God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, and there was nothing made before.
Man. Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, that's not biblical, is it?
No. I have trouble clearly understanding what he is talking about here, I have to tell you.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
Not only is it a hard book to read anyway for the very first time at 10 o'clock in the evening for a not native English speaker.
Yeah, right. This is true, but I appreciate your efforts, Jörg.
But second of all, he writes about things that I would have problems understanding probably even if he wrote them in plain German.
Well, you said, I think, in the last broadcast we did of this book that, there are things that each author says that aren't really in line, with what we believe today. There's just, it's just, we're all limited maybe in some scope, but certainly why would you want to call creation? I don't know. It is confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I just want the listeners to know that I am also having trouble understanding this, so maybe we just have to read on to get a better understanding of this as we read along, that he will reveal himself to us in the way that he meant what he speaks about here. This typology, let's call it. That's a word that he uses here in the next sentence. Mm-hmm. This reminds us that there is a higher typology than that to which we have just adverted. As the coming of man might be seen through the long eras in the dim indications of nature, so the coming of the God-man might be seen all through the ages in the numerous types that prefigured him. The whole worship of the Old Testament church was a system of typology. All its rites and ordinances contemplated an end and object beyond and outside of themselves, and prefigured and foretold that end. The altar foreshadowed a better altar. The sacrifice announced a greater sacrifice. And the priest in his robes of glory was, after all, but a dim foreshadowing of that priest of transcendent dignity and glory whom the oath of his father had made a high priest forever. As we can read in the book of Hebrews, Jesus was made a high priest forever by the Father. But over and above the special types which of express purpose figured the person and work of Christ, there was a typical element underlying the whole Old Testament history. Scarce is there a personage of note in the sacred annals who is not typical. Quote, "There cometh one after me mightier than I," unquote, was the announcement not of John only, but of all. Scarce was there an event in the history of the church that was not typical. The deliverances which the church celebrated when the yoke of Egypt or Midian or of other enemy was broken presented a picture of a deliverance worthy of being celebrated with yet louder songs. The dissolving of the yoke of her one great enemy by the sacrifice of the cross. This typology differs, we admit, from the preceding. The first is founded in the constitution of things. The latter had its existence from the express appointment of God. But when we see the same general character stamped upon both, typology inwoven into the one originally, the other made typological by divine enactment, we are enabled to trace a very beautiful harmony between the two. And our faith is confirmed in the doctrine that the same mind which gave to nature its peculiar constitution gave likewise to the worship of the Old Testament Church its special form. In nature we behold the principles of beauty and order developing and broadening in each successive stage till the terminal act of creation is reached. First, we see them dimly appearing in the crystal into which, in obedience to the law of attraction, the particles of matter arrange themselves. Next, we behold them budding in the flower, and next, rising and expanding in the stately tree, and lastly, we see them finding their consummation, their full and final revelation in the system of the universe. For the starry arch has for its keystone the same principle that molds the raindrop, and the glories of the sky are but evolutions on a grand scale of those same laws of beauty which give to the crystal its regularity and to the flower its grace. So, in Christ, his personal graces, his official gifts, the truth and grace of the gospel, how dimly did they break upon the world. A solitary ray from some ceremonial rite or some typical person was all that was at first seen. But the light waxed apace as the dispensation passed on, and types shadowy and dim were succeeded by types clearer and fuller, till at last the scattered virtues and graces of 1,000 types were concentrated in the man Christ Jesus, and in his person and ministry the gospel day broke upon the church. Yeah, I understand now what he is talking about, I have to tell you, but this is stuff for, I almost dare to say, studied people. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, that's what I see it too as, yeah.
He speaks in terms very picturesque,
yes.
you know? And when you just read the words, it is very hard to imagine what picture he has put right in front of you right here, because he already throws the next picture and the next picture. And then all of a sudden he says, and this is what the point I think he is making, just when the picture is finished, then you can only see how it all fits together.
Yes.
That is how he explains this creation. That's how he explains the church in the Old Testament. That was always a mirror of the things to come, only showing the things to come that manifested only in the time when Jesus Christ finally came. And then all of a sudden we could behold his glory. I think this is, in other words, a little bit about what James Edwin Wylie tells us here about.
Well said, Jörg.
Yeah, but he could have used a little bit easier stuff because...
yeah, it's pretty flowery, yeah.
Anyway, it's not easy for me to read and understand at the same time.
Me neither, so. No. Just for me sitting to listen to it is hard enough, yeah.
Okay, you're just listening. I'm reading. What do you think that means to me?
It's true. It's not that easy, actually. Maybe back then, in that time frame, it was more appropriate, I guess.
Well, people had a better speech than we have today in the 19th century than we have in the 21st.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Our languages have been butchered.
They sure have, yeah. Not only our language, Jörg, but our whole way of life has been butchered.
Yeah, but we have to understand that people like James Edwin Wylie, who have been authors their whole life, they deal with language all day. That's their job to do that.
Yeah.
And now we are here 120, 130 years later, trying to make sense of something that even then was only for learned people to understand. And we are approaching this from a different understanding of language altogether, of communication altogether, because we don't communicate anymore in the way that they communicated 120, 130 years ago. I tell you, we are not sophisticated over them. We are barbarians in comparison to the people of old.
It's true. Absolutely true. I agree 100%.
And I live over here in Europe. I see the butchering of language every day. I see the butchering of of Dutch that I'm speaking. I see the butchering of German day by day by day, especially when I watch television with my mom about noontime when we watch this cooking program, and they have guys and girls over there who do some cooking, and you hear them speak German. Sometimes I ask my mother, is that the language I grew up with? I don't even understand these guys anymore, you know? The whole culture is so butchered. And,
yeah, it's become a meme culture. It's disgusting.
Anyway, let's continue. So is it in Providence, the author says. History has its types as well as nature, and in seeking for the source of the historic typology, we must have respect both to the unchangeableness and universality of the laws by which God governs nations and the special form which he stamps on certain events, in virtue of his special interposition. The one gives an essential identity to history, and hence what are termed its reproductions, for with great invariable laws underlying it, a generic resemblance must come to reign among its great epochs. But over and above, there have been events so sharply defined, so obviously shaped and molded by the hand of God, that they can be regarded only as types, specially set forth of other events that were to succeed them at the distance of ages. How often has the future risen upon the world in the very likeness of the past? Now, this is a sentence that I understand, Bret.
Mm-hmm.
I would say history repeats itself.
How often has the future risen upon the world in the very likeness of the past? That nails it.
And has not that likeness sometimes been so striking that the event which bore it seemed to mean not so much a new event as the former and veritable one wakened from its sleep of centuries and returned to enact its part a second time upon the stage of the world? The Bible recognizes and sanctions this typology of events. How often do we find it foretelling a deliverance yet so achieved under the name of deliverance already past? And why? But to teach the world that in the former it had seen the likeness, and not the likeness only, but the essential principles and veritable results of that which was to come. The coming of John, the forerunner of the Messiah, was foretold under the name of Elijah. Why? Because John was to come in the spirit and the power of Elijah. He was to bear the same moral likeness and fulfill a similar office with his great type. This is the key to all similar predictions. Now, finally, the author makes sense to me.
Yes.
Thanks, I get it now. When the Bible foretells the rising of the martyrs, it plainly indicates not the very martyrs who are fallen on sleep, but new confessors who are to stand up in their spirit and power, animated by their principles and sustaining their cause. In like manner, when the Bible foretells a deliverance from Egypt and a deliverance from Babylon in an age yet to come, and paints, as it does, a triumphal procession of escaped captives coming unto Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads, it is not the literal Babylon that is meant. It is no repetition of the literal drama for which we are to look, but a drama which, while it will greatly transcend from the former, while it will greatly transcend the former in its scale, will nevertheless be the same in its essential principles, will resemble it in the power and goodness of God and the victory it will bring to the church. We cannot safely ignore in our interpretations of prophecy the underlying typology of providence. This principle gives much beauty, propriety, and significancy to the terms of prophecy, and especially to the application of the men and the events of the past to the scenes of the future. On this principle we firmly look for the providence of God culminating in a grand and universal deliverance of the Church. Every one of her former deliverances was a step towards her final deliverance. Every former deliverance gave her wider views of divine truth, enlisted additional forces in her service, and, in one way or other, bettered her position in the earth. But this deliverance will put her in possession of all truth. It will enlist in her favor all the forces of the world and place her in a position of complete, of absolute and impregnable security. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation will guard a point for walls and bulwarks, as we can read in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 1. Every former deliverance perceptibly raised her position and enabled her the better to cope with other and hostile societies. This will lift her to evident and indisputable supremacy. In Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, we read, "It shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills." Every deliverance of former ages helped to extend her dominion and open a wider sphere for her in the world. This will put her in possession of the whole earth. It will exalt her to sovereignty. Who claims today to be sovereign? Only the Antichrist, right?
That's right.
When the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established, in the top of the mountains, all nations shall flow unto it. Former deliverances brought her escape from this or the other enemy. This will bring her victory over them all. The God of peace shall bruise Satan under her feet. Other deliverances were but temporary. This, as regards time, will be everlasting. The truth will continue in her from age to age, and as the night cannot return while the light of the sun continues, so the darkness and slavery of error cannot be felt while truth, like a never-setting sun, shines within her and around her. There shall be no night there. The glory of God did lighten it, and the lamp is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light thereof. Revelation chapter 21, verse 2. This will be the church's great exodus. And when on this day she marshals her ransomed host and begins her mighty song, she will find that her members have escaped from every land on earth, and that her triumphal hymn is pealed forth by every tongue and kindred under heaven. Quote, "The days come, saith the Lord, that they shall no more say, The Lord liveth, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country and from all countries whither I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land." Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 7 and 8. These deliverances were types as well, types of that one grand consummating deliverance in which they shall all find their completion. They foretold it. They exhibited its likeness. Each is passed by, shedding upon the church its benediction and emptying upon the world its vial of wrath, said to the one, For you there remaineth a greater blessing, and to the other, there cometh to you a mightier woe. They were judgment days, but, like Enoch, they prophesied of the coming of a greater, which was to finish what they had but begun. Like unto the first Exodus, then, will be the second. It will be like it in every particular. Only it will be greater. It will be like it as regards the position in which it will find the church, a small body comparatively, pressed by a powerful combination of foes and brought to extremity. It will be like it, too, in its miracles. We look not for the stupendous physical signs to signalize the second which attended the first Exodus, but we look for signs and wonders just as stupendous, although of a moral kind. Literal bars may not then shut in the church, but political complications will do so. Crafty conspiracies and powerful combinations will enclose her like walls of brass, will roll around her like stormy seas. And the church's escape from these overwhelming dangers will be by a path so intricate and wonderful that it will reveal the hand of God as visibly as did her escape of old from the literal gates of brass and the bars of iron. And, in fine, the second Exodus will resemble the first, and will in fact repeat it, by the ruin it will pour upon the kingdoms which have kept the church in bondage. When the tribes marshaled on the shore of the Red Sea, and with timbrels and dances and songs celebrated their deliverance, Egypt lay behind them, a terrible scene of devastation and overthrow. So shall it be once more. When the church takes her final flight, the Egypt of her bondage will again become a wreck. It is complete and total overthrow with which the type menaces all the anti-Christian kingdoms. Their power, glory, wealth must all perish. As things dedicated to idolatry, they are given over to burning and utter consumption. And the church, emerging from a world in ruins, will enter on her mighty task of building up the earth, of restoring society, of rekindling the lamp of science and art, of loosening the sweet influences of civilization, and so, having bound up the wounds and soothed the distractions of the nations, she will knit them together in the bonds of truth and love, and reign as mistress and sovereign of the new heavens and the new earth, which are to rise upon the ruins of the old. Such is the Exodus that is coming, and whose coming the first Exodus and many others typified and foretold. In no after age will it ever be forgotten. Like some mighty Alp, some monarch of mountains, which keeps in the traveller's eye after every surrounding hill has sunk beneath the horizon, this deliverance will be seen above the church's horizon through all coming time. Beheld from the ages of the future, it will be seen towering proudly up, standing preeminent and alone, the one grand exodus of the church. The reason of the typological character of Providence is as obvious as its wisdom is incontrovertible. Jehovah taught man as he was able to bear, and shaped the lesson to the growth of his faculty. Were it some marvelous and complicated piece of mechanism, whether should we prefer to study it in the machine or in the model? If in the machine itself, would not the complexity of its parts and the rapidity of its movements bewilder us? Would we not find the scale too great for mastering the principle on which it was constructed? And would we not gladly turn to the model, where all is to be seen with greater simplicity and within a more manageable compass? And so, in unveiling his character and proclaiming the great laws of his working, God sets before us first of all the model and invites us to study it. He exhibits his justice, his goodness and truth in action, first in miniature, with reference to a single family or a single tribe, and last of all, he presents them to a wider area of a kingdom or of a world. The principles are the same in both cases. It is the application only and the scale of development that are different. In nature, the law of gravity is equally illustrated in the dewdrop as in the vast terraquoise globe, equally illustrated in the fall of the stone as in the revolution of the planet. Well, some words, of course, I don't agree with the author here.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to go into a big discussion about calling the
We
Earth a
did that
planet.
last time. Yeah, I
And
think.
exactly, I just
Yeah.
referred to the first readings and,
Yeah,
look that up.
Exactly.
In like manner, he continues to say, the moral principles of the divine government are equally shown in the overthrow of a single individual as in the ruin of a world. In the miniature dramas of early times, as in those great and terrible dispensations which are to pass over the earth in these latter days, making its pillars to tremble and the stars of its sky to fall. That was a very interesting end of chapter.
Yeah, it is. For sure.
I have to take a sip of water here, I'm sorry.
Please do, Yerk. Thanks for reading.
I really have a dry mouth.
Yeah, I bet. That's a lot of breath, doing all
Yeah.
this reading. It's always good
So
to have water.
Yeah, it's always good to have water, that's right.
Essential.
So we come into chapter 4, which is called the Divine Method of Revelation and Government. This is probably a little bit better understandable. We have only one other remark to make. Oh, then the book is already over. God has carried on the unveiling of himself and the instruction of the race from the beginning by 3 great and well-marked stages. The first stage was that of oral communication. The second was that of typical revelation, and the third was that of moral demonstration. Voices, types, dispensations. Such are the 3 forms which divine revelation has successively assumed. It will be seen that there is a gradual widening of the sphere in revelation. The light from the eternal center obeys the same law as that from the natural sun. The sphere it fills expands directly as the distance increases. In the first days of our race, ere yet the gates of Eden had closed upon our exiled progenitor, God descended in person and announced his will to Adam. After the fall, the same method of communication was continued. But soon, in consideration of the frailty of a fallen creature, who could not bear to look upon the face of God, inspired men were substituted for the Creator. Enoch and Noah were prophets and preachers of righteousness. We can trace the same method of instruction continued for some considerable time into the post-Diluvian eras. The call of Abraham, the mission of Moses, in short, all the great moral epochs of the early world were inaugurated by the personal appearance of Jehovah, the Creator God. The world being now prepared for the transition in the room of the oral announcements came next symbolic revelations. The divine voice did not become holy and instantly silent. Oral communication was still employed in part and as a subordinate means of revelation, but the main and established channel of instruction was now the symbolic. A typological system of worship was appointed. The great fundamental doctrine of supernatural religion were put before the world in type. For what is a type but the embodiment of a truth, a doctrine and symbol? That typical system was, in truth, a preacher of righteousness. It continually addressed the eye and, through the eye, the understanding. With the key of the system in man's possession, for God had already made it known, it required but little study to read off its meaning as accurately and clearly as if it had been written on the leaves of a book. The Levitical worship was just a pre-revelation of the New Testament, written in typical characters instead of ordinary ones. The Levitical law and worship was just a pre-revelation of Jesus to come, written in typical characters instead of ordinary ones, meaning symbolism. Yeah, because the slaughtering of calves and doves and bulls and lambs was never to take away the sin of the world, but it was only a figure, it was only a typical character. Yeah, that's what I think he describes here very, very well. In the early and symbolic volume was there wanting one cardinal truth which has found a place in the letter and literal one? The fall, the atonement, regeneration by the Spirit on the one side, and on the other the holiness, the truth, and the love of God. These were the great truths which the types revealed, and these are the great truths that form the burden of the New Testament. And when the typical passed into the antitypical, and shadow became substance, then commenced the higher and broader form of divine revelation, that meaning of moral demonstration. We call it the higher because it is more spiritual. It is the more spiritual, sorry. In our age, no prophet comes forth to address men. No type utters its mystic voice. But those very principles which prophet and type had previously revealed are now developed in action and embodied in mighty dispensations and are seen sweeping in righteousness and terror across the stage of time. 5 words sufficed in a former age to announce some great truth, but 5 centuries are required now to permit that the truth to manifest and unfold itself. Holy, holy, holy was the seraph's cry. That cry is still pealed forth by cherubic dispensations. Those mighty moral revolutions which take centuries to complete their cycle, and which, as they pass across the stage, crush beneath their chariot wheels triumphant wickedness, while they lift up the righteous from the dust, repeat in mightier thunders the seraph's cry, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. It was the temple roof that resounded with those strains when uttered in the prophet's hearing. The mighty voice of the other will awaken the echoes of a world and ring along the arches of the sky. These are the prophets God now sends to men. Potent they are. Their fan is in their hand. They speak as one having authority. We cannot bind them to a stake, as men did the earlier prophets, nor can we shut them up in the dungeon and so silence their message. They defy the fetter and the faggot. Thus it is that God now reveals himself. This is the brightness of his coming. With his own essential splendor does he fill the world. He irradiates the earth with the fire of his holiness and justice, and beatifies the church with the soft brilliancy of his truth and loving kindness. When the philosopher would demonstrate some theorem in the mathematics, how does he proceed? He takes a sheet of paper and constructs thereon with a pen a diagram. From the lines and angles of this diagram he proceeds to reason. He advances step by step, and at length he arrives at his conclusion. He has demonstrated the truth of his proposition. But the truth which he has demonstrated on this limited surface, and by the aid of the lines and angles, is the truth he knows of universal application. Though this sheet of paper were 1,000,000 of times larger, and though these lines were 1,000,000 of times longer, it would not in the slightest affect the result at which he has arrived. The theorem would be equally true if worked out upon the error of a kingdom, and when worked out upon the little bit of paper before him, it should be equally true were he dealing with quantities themselves as we're dealing, as he here does, but with but the representatives of quantities. I have to read that sentence again. Sorry. The theorem would be equally true if worked out upon the error of a kingdom, as when worked out upon a little bit of paper before him. It would be equally true were he dealing with the quantities themselves as when dealing, as he here does, with but the representatives of quantities. But farther, we shall suppose that the philosopher in question wishes to make the correctness of his demonstration yet more clear, and the truth of his theorem yet more convincing. What now does he do? He assumes that the theorem is false. Proceeding on this assumption, he takes another sheet of paper. He describes thereon a new diagram. From the lines and angles now before him he proceeds to reason, and, advancing step by step as aforetime, he arrives at last at a self-evident contradiction, or at the palpable falsehood. This is the reductio ad absurdum, or that is Latin, reductio ad absurdum, means reduction into absurdness. It is as much a proof of the truth of the theorem as was the direct demonstration. It is a verification by the converse. Here are two witnesses. Assuming the theorem to be true and reasoning therefrom, he arrives at a truth. Assuming the theorem to be false and reasoning therefrom, he arrives at a falsehood. At the mouth of these two witnesses, the theorem is established. Now, excuse me, Bret, I again have to take another sip of water, but this is a very interesting part we just read on, because this just explains the false science that the world today is overloaded with, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure does.
Very interesting read this is.
It is.
Now, fully confiding in the truth of his principles and being well assured that by their help he may remove mountains, fill up valleys, or measure the bulk of the distant planets, he goes forth and applies them in the construction of works of great practical utility. He engirdles the earth with iron roads. He hangs a pathway over the yawning chasm of the boiling deep. He bores through great mountains. He bridges over wide oceans. He enables nations to hold instantaneous converse, although divided from one another by mighty mountain chains and stormy seas. He brings near the ends of the earth. He opens highways for industry, creates pledges of peace, scatters abundance among the homes of men, diffuses the light of civilization and science. And thus he demonstrates that not only are these principles true, be the scale on which they are applied ever so great, but that they are beneficent as true. They confer on man the dominion of the earth on which he dwells. After the same fashion does God proceed in establishing those great theorems that lie at the foundation of personal virtue and national prosperity. First of all, he announces them on the page of the Bible. There they stand, like the diagram of the mathematician, open to the eye of all. The announcement is in language brief, simple, and plain, like the unpretending lines of the mathematical demonstration. Yet is it representative of a power to save or to destroy, according as it believed and obeyed, as it is believed and obeyed, or repudiated and disobeyed. But this is not all. Jehovah demonstrates these propositions on a great scale. He comes forth upon the broad stage of the world, and by the acts of his providence, he works out the truth of his great moral theorems. He conducts his demonstration leisurely. He takes 2 centuries, or maybe 5 centuries, to reason out his conclusion. And why? Because he wishes that men may understand every step in the process, and that its crowning lesson may remain fixed in the world's minds for all time as an eternal truth and immutable law. It pleases him, too, to employ 2 modes of demonstration, the reductio ad verum and the reductio ad absurdum, means the reduction in truth and the reduction in adversity. Okay? He lets one nation assume that the theorem is true, and working on that idea, it arrives in due time at greatness. Do you see the early America right there? He permits another nation to assume that the theorem is false, and fashioning its policy according, it arrives at ruin. I see Rome here.
Yeah. Or the future America.
Yeah, okay. But, you know,
same thing.
He lets one nation assume that the theorem is true, and working on that idea, it arrives in due time at greatness. The United States of America, as long as it was really Protestant, arrived at in due time at greatness.
Yep,
Became a
Protestant
mighty nation.
principles. That's right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
became a wonderful nation. Yeah,
That's true.
it was a light of the world. The United States in modern times is that what Israel should have been in the olden times, a
Yes,
light for the
but by
world.
submitting to Romanism and accepting that as an ecumenical justification, look what's happened.
Well, that's the other point.
It
Yeah.
is. Mm.
Yeah, but I think that James Edgar Wylie also here in this at this moment when he writes this is thinking about his own country, you know, Great Britain.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Now there's something. Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, it's an interesting point of view that James Edgar Wylie shares here
It
with
is.
us.
It's wonderful.
We are speaking about our Creator God, and he lets now one nation assume that the theorem is true, and working on that idea, it arrives in due time at greatness. You know, when you base your doings as a nation on the Bible, you will achieve greatness.
Yeah.
At the same time, he permits another nation to assume that the theorem is false, and fashioning its policy according, it arrives at ruin. Look at all Catholic countries for an example.
Mm-hmm.
It sinks into the blackness of political and moral death, as surely as the other mounts to dominion and glory. Thus, by two witnesses that cannot lie, does God ratify and seal every word he has spoken in the Bible. The one witness testifies that the proposition cannot be false, and the other testifies that its converse cannot be true. They stand like a double-headed Janus. One,
I gotta laugh. Oh, that's great.
the
Thank
one
you.
looking back on greatness lost, and the other face looking forth on greatness achieved. The double-sided God Janus. The truth of the divine word is demonstrated with equal emphasis in the nation that is lost and also in the nation that is saved. Now, let us take an instance. It scarcely matters at what place we open the volume of history. There is not a page in it all on which we do not see this proof in progress or in the act of being summed up. Well, isn't that true, Bret?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the history as we know it and we look back in the time, don't we see every volume of history that there is not a page on which we see this proof in progress? We open the book at the middle of the 16th century. A moment's glance at the several kingdoms of the European Commonwealth presents contrasts sufficiently striking. This one in especial challenges our attention. This one in especial. Yeah, okay, this is in Old English. Today we would probably say this one especially challenges our attention in modern English. It is the great empire of the Roman Emperor Charles V and the little territory of Scotland. Since the days of imperial Rome, there had arisen no empire like the Empire of Spain. In the occupant of the Escurial, as aforetime in the occupant of the Palatine, the world had again found its master. Under the scepter of that master were gathered the races and tongues of a third part of the globe. To adapt the bold image of the prophet to the stately Spanish monarchy, the Spaniard was a cedar in Europe, with fair branches and with a shadowing shroud, and of an high stature, and his top was among the thick boughs. The waters made him great, the deep set him up on high, with her rivers running round about his plants. He sent out his little rivers unto all the trees of the field. Therefore his height was exalted above all the trees of the field, and his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long, because of the multitude of waters when he shot forth. This is from Ezekiel chapter 31, verses 3 through 5. The Spanish monarchy at that period stood without a rival at the head of Europe. And this is why the Roman Catholic Church proclaimed in the beginning of the 16th century that all heretics were dealt with, that all heretics were driven out of this world, and the Roman Catholic Church ruled supreme. And then they changed in a council in the beginning of the 16th century, in 1512, the name from the Holy Roman Empire to the Holy Roman Empire of German nation. And 5 years later, a little monk arose and stabbed the Roman Catholic Church right in the heart. Now, the Spanish monarchy had at that period stood without a rival at the head of Europe. Its territory, which extended over 3 continents, was made up of the fairest lands on the globe. It was served by the ablest statesmen of the age. Its exchequer was replenished from the wealth of a world. Its armies were inured to victory in every hemisphere. Its fleets rode triumphant on the ocean. Remember, a few years later, the Spanish Armada. The astute genius of Charles and the matchless deceit of Philip had won for its policy the reputation of consummate ability. Nations sued humbly at its gates, and kings waited to learn their destiny from its award. It had laid its right hand upon Mexico and Peru, and the rich and various products of their soil and the wealth of their mines borne across the deep stocked the markets and filled the mints and silver shops of Spain. With its left hand it grasped the Orient. It gathered the fragrant spices and precious gems of Eastern India. Hers, too, were the manufactures of Belgium. The forges of Liège and the looms of Bruges and Ghent ministered to her luxury. Hers were the corn and oil and silk of Lombardy. Hers were the fine wheat and the wines of the 2 Sicilies. And to her from every region on earth came galleons, richly laden with the precious things of the air, the earth, and the sea. Thus was she great. The sky was not high enough for her proud head, nor the earth broad enough for her lordly limbs. Spain sat in the pride of her heart as she looked abroad over a world that seemed created only for her use. The cedars in the garden of God cannot hide me. The fir trees are not like my boughs, and the chestnut trees are not like my branches. Nor any tree in the garden of God is like unto me in my beauty. When we read this description of the country of Spain, we may understand why Spain was the most Catholic country in the history of the world, even until today. And I think, Bret, this would be a nice moment to stop the reading after almost an hour.
Yes, and actually that makes me think of our study of Ignatius de Loyola being a Basque of
coming from Spain,
Spain,
the northeast of Spain. The northwest. The northwest.
I know so very little about Spain. I've never been there.
I've only been there for vacation, not studying the country at all. But I'm studying the country right now with the study I do with the Bible and history, and there's a lot to learn about Spain.
Oh yeah, that's for
sure. It is no miracle that the first Jesuits came out of Spain.
Yes. Makes sense.
Like you mentioned, Loyola, who was a Basque, who was a Spaniard. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, that was an interesting reading. In the beginning, I thought, where is this leading to? I don't understand the word.
Yeah, but it's just the standard teaching that the whole world knows, That's what it is.
The author opened up a little bit, huh?
He did. Yeah. That was great.
At least to my understanding. Yeah. So let's take a little pause here, and maybe you have some last words in this video for our viewers.
Oh, I think the book speaks for itself. It's just really interesting. I'm really, really looking forward to continuing in this book, Jörg. It's just, I really enjoy it. And thank you.
Well, yeah, then we shall do that next time that we have a meeting together, and we'll share an hour with our listeners in reading in the Great Exodus from James Atkin Wylie. And now, after the explanation that you got from these two theoms, as he spoke about, the one based on the truth and the other one based on the lie, and both achieving their goal, maybe now you see the Bible with other eyes, and now you can read it again and understand it even better with this understanding that James Atkin Wylie gave us here during this reading. So for tonight, I'm just going to say goodbye. I'm quite a little bit tired now, and want to leave you up to your own studies, and never forget also to include the Bible in your studies, because that is the basis of all your studies in the first place. The Bible, the true preserved Word of God in the 1611 King James Bible that we have today. So until next time, study your Bible, and then we're going to see you again. Maranatha.
We were on the way back from London on the jet plane, and there was a man dressed in a uniform like the Catholic priests wear, and he was conducting himself not like a priest you'd see in a movie, very friendly. He was a very sophisticated type man, and people could sense that. And I never thought I'd see him again, but in Baltimore at the airline station where the baggages come off, well, I turned around and there he was next to me. And I just turned to him and said, "Hello, friend, are you a Jesuit?" And he says, "Yes," with a big smile. You see all of his teeth. And he was very happy with himself. I said, "Well, listen, I'm very interested in the Jesuits. I've read some about them. And what would you think about the Council of Trent and what was invented in the Council of Trent and the infiltration of the Jesuits into Protestantism and the use of the Jesuits through organizations like the Illuminati and the futurism theory, the secret rapture that they invented for the Protestants?" And I talked about a lot of those things, and he had a metamorphosis take place. His face became rigid, his smile went away, and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "You know quite a bit, don't you?" Like he never expected it. And I told him that you know, I was one of the Protestants that got away, and if he could realize that if somebody like me knew those things, just imagine some of the other of God's people that know those things and are willing to tell anybody about them. And it was an amazing situation how that man's face changed, and he thought he was like in one identity, but all of a sudden he realized that these dark secrets of theirs, they're being found out, and I'll never forget that. Would you consider that Jesuitism to be an occult secret society?
It is an occult secret society from the point of view that the Jesuit order, what you know of the Jesuit order and what everybody knows of the Jesuit order is not the truly Jesuit order. What that means is even the Jesuits within the Jesuit order, they all are not knowing the secret society, the inner secret society that they are surrounded by.
I would like to think that the reason for this is that I too am a son of this great continent from which we have all received so much and toward which we share a common responsibility. Each son or daughter of a given country has a mission, a personal and social responsibility. Your own responsibility as members of Congress is to enable this country by your legislative activity to grow as a nation. You are the face of its people. They are representatives. You are called to defend and preserve the dignity of your fellow citizens in the tireless and demanding pursuit of the common good. For this is the chief aim of all politics.